ravens have been residents at the Tower of London for centuries now. And according to belief, if all the ravens leave the tower, the British kingdom will collapse and the country will be in a state of chaos.
For over 5 centuries, the mystery of the princes in the tower has haunted British history. 2 young heirs, Edward V and his brother Richard, vanished inside the Tower of London in 1483, never to be seen again. Did their uncle, King Richard III, unalive them, or did they escape? Historians have argued for centuries, but modern science may have finally solved the issue. A groundbreaking DNA test has revealed shocking new evidence that changes everything we thought we knew about the fate of the lost princes. What the scientists discovered will leave you speechless and rewrite royal history forever. So, join us in this video as we reveal the details. The bones that spoke after 500 years. When the urn of the princes was finally opened, centuries of silence were shattered. For over 500 years, the bones believed to be those of the lost princes in the tower had rested in Westminster Abbey, untouched and uncertain. But when modern scientists subjected them to DNA testing, the results were nothing short of astonishing. Using the same methods that once identified King Richard III,
they believe they've uncovered the remains of long-lost royalty. He happens to be King Richard III.
Laboratories specializing in ancient DNA extracted mitochondrial sequences from the teeth of both skeletons. The findings were crystal clear. Their maternal DNA matched the royal Plantagenet line, directly linking them to Elizabeth Woodville, the prince's mother. Further testing with living descendants of Edward IV's bloodline confirmed the match beyond question. Radiocarbon dating placed the remains in the late 15th century, precisely when Edward V and his younger brother, Richard of Shrewsbury, vanished behind the cold stone walls of the Tower of London. Historians could no longer dismiss the theory. The bones buried in 1678 were, in fact, the lost princes. The revelation sent shockwaves through the world of history. A mystery that had haunted generations now had a solid scientific footing. Yet, as one question was answered, a darker one emerged, not who they were, but how they died. Forensic analysis revealed that one skeleton belonged to a boy around 12 years old and the other to a boy of about 9 or 10. The exact ages of the princes when they disappeared in 1483. Growth markers in their teeth showed they were healthy, well-fed children, heirs to a royal future that ended far too soon. Their bodies, discovered hidden beneath a staircase, told a story of secrecy and haste. Whoever buried them did not intend for them to be found. Princes of England were not laid to rest in honor, but hidden away in silence. Naturally, suspicion once again turned to Richard III. The boys vanished shortly after his coronation, and centuries of chroniclers painted him as the ruthless uncle who cleared his path to the throne through blood. While the DNA cannot prove guilt, it brings the timeline back to his reign, crushing theories that the princes lived into Henry VII's time. Still, others point to the ambitious Duke of Buckingham, who had once supported Richard before turning against him. Some historians believe he may have acted on his own, hoping to seize power amid the chaos of the Wars of the Roses. Whoever gave the order, one thing is now certain: the princes died as children within the tower. Their hurried, hidden burial speaks louder than words of power, fear, and betrayal. And though science has given them names and faces once more, it has deepened the tragedy. The princes are no longer just ghosts of rumor, but real children, whose lives were stolen in silence. Their discovery brings pride to descendants of the Plantagenet line, and sorrow to those who cherish the myths of English history. For the world, the mystery is no longer if they died, but why they had to die so young. The bones have finally spoken, and their message is clear. The tower's darkest secret was true all along. But why exactly were they known as the princes in the tower? And what was the story behind their disappearance and death? Keep watching to find out. The day the princes vanished. The story of the princes in the tower begins with 2 boys, Edward and Richard, heirs to one of England's most powerful dynasties. Edward V was only 12 when his father, King Edward IV, died suddenly in 1483. His younger brother, Richard of Shrewsbury, was just 9. Their mother, Elizabeth Woodville, must have known the world had become a dangerous place overnight. With the throne now belonging to her eldest son, every ambitious man in England had reason to take sides. Their uncle, Richard, Duke of Gloucester, was appointed protector of the realm, the man meant to guide and safeguard the new young king until his coronation. Under that pretext, Richard ordered the boys to be lodged in the Tower of London, not unusual at the time, since the tower also served as a royal residence. But what began as preparation for Edward's coronation soon became something far darker. Before the ceremony could take place, Parliament declared the boys illegitimate, stripping Edward of his right to the throne. Almost immediately after, Richard claimed the crown for himself, becoming King Richard III. It was a move that shocked the court and changed history forever. After that, the princes were seen less and less. Guards and attendants reported that the boys were still alive for a time, but by the end of the summer, they had vanished entirely. No witnesses, no confessions, no official record, just silence. Rumors spread like wildfire. Many believed Richard III had the boys assassinated to secure his claim, fearing their very existence would spark rebellion. Others suspected the ambitious Duke of Buckingham, who might have sought the throne for himself. And when Henry Tudor seized power 2 years later as Henry VII, some whispered that he or his mother, the formidable Lady Margaret Beaufort, had ordered the deed to erase any rival heirs. Still, not everyone believed the princes died. Decades later, men claiming to be the lost boys reappeared, most famously Lambert Simnel and Perkin Warbeck. Both declared they were the true heirs of Edward IV, and both won powerful supporters, including the Duchess of Burgundy, the prince's own aunt. Were they imposters? Or had one of the princes truly escaped the tower's shadow? The mystery deepened in 1674 when workers at the tower discovered a small wooden box buried beneath a staircase. Inside were 2 tiny skeletons, the remains of children. The find reignited the centuries-old question: had the lost princes finally been found? And if so, what terrible fate had brought them there? The stage was set for one of history's most enduring mysteries, a royal tragedy woven with ambition, betrayal, and the silent stones of the Tower of London. So, what prompted the case of the princes in the tower to be reopened and re-examined? Let's find out. The woman who reopened the coldest case in history. For over 5 centuries, the story of the princes in the tower had been told and retold. 2 young heirs imprisoned by their uncle, Richard III, and assassinated in silence. It was a tale so ingrained in English history that few ever questioned it. But one woman, Philippa Langley, refused to accept legend as fact. After leading the groundbreaking discovery of King Richard III's remains beneath a car park in Leicester, Langley wasn't satisfied with closing one chapter. She wanted to reopen another. During Richard's reburial week, a headline in the Daily Mail branded him a child killer. That single phrase reignited Langley's determination. She realized that centuries of hearsay had shaped Richard's reputation more than verifiable evidence ever had. If modern science could find a lost king, could modern investigation finally uncover the truth about his nephews? That question gave birth to the Missing Princes Project. Langley designed her new investigation like a police cold case, not as a historical retelling, but as a forensic inquiry. She consulted with detectives, barristers, and forensic specialists to develop a methodical, bias-free process. The rule was simple: start from zero. No assumptions, no hindsight, and no blaming anyone without proof. The project quickly grew into an international effort, enlisting over 300 volunteers who combed through archives across Britain and Europe. They searched records from 1483 to 1486, gathering every scrap of information that might shed light on what really happened after the boys disappeared. The sheer volume of data was staggering, more than 300,000 documents, so vast that a supercomputer was needed to organize and cross-reference the findings. Langley, who had long doubted the traditional story of the prince's assassination, was careful not to let personal belief influence the evidence. Speaking on Matt Lewis's Gone Medieval podcast, she described how she began by constructing a detailed timeline, starting from the last confirmed sighting of the princes in June 1483. And to her surprise, she found no solid evidence that either boy died during Richard III's reign. Following police advice, Langley dug into routine records, legal documents, household accounts, payments, and administrative logs, the kind of mundane paperwork that history usually ignores. It was there, in the dusty margins of bureaucracy, that the most intriguing clues began to surface. Mentions of Edward V continued to appear in administrative records throughout Richard's rule. When scribes referred to events between April and June 1483, when Edward had briefly been king, they called him the Bastard Edward V, or the Bastard King. Crucially, there were no prayers for his soul, no wording that implied he was dead. In medieval England, if a person of royal blood had died, their passing was noted with prayers and respectful phrasing. The absence of this was striking. It suggested that, during Richard III's time on the throne, Edward V was not regarded as dead. As for his younger brother, Richard, Duke of York, his name appeared far less frequently, which wasn't surprising given his lower status. Still, one curious reference emerged in the treasurer's accounts for Cambridge, dated September 1484, a payment to Richard, Duke of York. Historians later debated whether this was a clerical mistake, perhaps confusing him with Edward, Earl of Warwick, who was known to be traveling with Richard III at the time. Yet, even as a potential error, the entry hinted that at least someone in England believed the younger prince was still alive. Langley's meticulous, evidence-first approach began to challenge everything historians thought they knew. Instead of proving assassination, her findings suggested survival, or, at the very least, that the prince's deaths didn't occur when or how traditional accounts claimed. The Missing Princes Project didn't just reopen an old mystery, it rewrote the rules of how history itself could be investigated. In a story long buried beneath rumor and royal propaganda, Philippa Langley's work brought something new: the possibility that the prince's final chapter might not have been written in the Tower at all. But what if the princes had survived? What could have been their fate? Stay tuned to find out. The clues, hidden in Henry Tudor's shadow. After 4 long years of searching every document, letter, and ledger she could find, Philippa Langley faced a troubling truth. There was no clear evidence the princes had died during Richard III's reign. Every trail she followed ended in speculation or silence. So, she decided to change direction entirely. What if the princes hadn't been assassinated at all? What if, against centuries of belief, they had actually survived? Following the advice of police specialists, Langley began a full forensic re-examination of the timeline, not as a historian, but as an investigator. She went back to the moment when Richard III's fate and that of his nephews intersected most dramatically. The Battle of Bosworth in 1485, where Richard fell and Henry Tudor claimed the crown. What Langley discovered challenged everything the world thought it knew. The earliest references to the prince's supposed assassination didn't appear during Richard's rule, but after his death, and they all pointed in the same direction: Henry Tudor's camp. The very first mention came from a Welsh poet around mid-August 1485, just after Bosworth, accusing Richard III of assassinating the boys. From that moment, the rumor spread rapidly, taking root in English history as accepted truth. But if the story only began after Richard was gone, who started it, and why? Langley's findings suggested it might have been political theater. Henry Tudor, a conqueror with a fragile claim to the throne, desperately needed to paint Richard as a monster. By branding him a child assassin, Henry could strengthen his own legitimacy and rally England behind his new dynasty. Even more revealing were Henry's actions in the days following his victory. Rather than riding directly to London, a strange move, given the city's importance and his urgent need to secure power, Henry delayed his arrival. Instead, he sent out search parties, apparently looking for the sons of Edward IV. If the princes had truly been dead for 2 years, why would the new king waste precious time and resources hunting for them? To Langley, the answer was clear. Henry's behavior only made sense if the princes were still alive. His search wasn't for corpses, but for living threats. Boys with a stronger blood claim to the throne than he could ever hope to have. What began as a mystery of assassination was now turning into one of survival. The more Langley dug, the more it seemed that the story of the princes' deaths had been born not in the shadow of Richard III, but in the triumph of Henry Tudor. And in that political sleight of hand, the truth may have been buried, not under a staircase, but beneath centuries of royal propaganda. But as Langley's discovery became known, another theory emerged, one that put Richard III right back as a suspect. Keep watching to find out the details. A chain, a will, and a chilling connection. Just when it seemed Philippa Langley's work might finally shift the centuries-old narrative away from Richard III's guilt, a startling new discovery once again pulled the story in the opposite direction. More than 500 years after the disappearance of the young princes, fresh evidence emerged, not from a royal archive or a forgotten letter, but from a will written by an ordinary woman connected to extraordinary events. Tim Thornton, a respected professor of history at the University of Huddersfield, had uncovered a document that reignited the debate. In his meticulous research, Thornton found mention of a chain once belonging to King Edward V, the elder of the two princes, in the will of Margaret Capel, a wealthy London widow. The will had been written some 33 years after the princes vanished in 1483, and yet there, buried within its formal lines, lay a clue linking her family directly to Richard III's inner circle. Margaret Capel was no random figure. She was the sister-in-law of Sir James Tyrrell, a man whose name had echoed through the centuries as one of the chief suspects in the boy's disappearance. Tyrrell had served Richard III faithfully and was later accused, in writings by Sir Thomas More, of overseeing the prince's assassination on the king's orders. For historians who believed in Richard's innocence, this new find posed an uncomfortable question. How had a chain belonging to Edward V ended up in the hands of a woman so closely connected to Tyrrell's family? According to Thornton, the chain was not a trinket or replaceable ornament. It was a royal chain of office, a personal emblem of kingship, richly adorned and unmistakable in its symbolism. Such pieces were unique, each crafted to reflect the identity and status of its owner. To find one of Edward V's possessions outside royal custody was shocking. It was an object that could not have changed hands without extraordinary circumstances. In the documentary Princes in the Tower, a damning discovery, which aired on Channel 5, Thornton's findings were explored by actor and historian Jason Watkins, alongside Tracy Borman, chief curator of historic royal palaces. Together, they examined how this single piece of evidence, a chain mentioned in a widow's will, could reopen the case against Richard III. Thornton himself acknowledged that there were still arguments in favor of Richard's innocence. Perhaps the chain had been distributed innocently, as part of dispersing the prince's possessions after their status was declared illegitimate. Or maybe it had been gifted, sold, or stolen in the political chaos that followed their disappearance. Yet, as Thornton explained, the connection between the Capel family and Sir James Tyrrell could not easily be dismissed. These chains were deeply personal, he noted. They represented power, allegiance, and identity. Finding Edward V in the hands of someone tied to Tyrrell makes the coincidence hard to believe. The discovery added new weight to the theory that Richard III, or those acting under his command, might indeed have been responsible for the deaths of his nephews. Even after centuries of debate, the pendulum of guilt seemed to swing once more toward the last Plantagenet king. For historians like Tracy Borman, the revelation was both thrilling and haunting. And as if history itself were whispering from the past, the discovery came just weeks after researchers had used cutting-edge technology to recreate the voice of Richard III's, revealing it to carry a warm Yorkshire accent. It was a curious twist. While science gave Richard back his voice, a forgotten will might have spoken the words that condemned him once again. But what legacy did the little princes leave behind? Let's find out. The princes who refused to be forgotten. Centuries after their short, tragic lives came to an end, the princes in the tower still cast long, haunting shadows over English history. With modern science confirming the identity of their bones, Edward and Richard are no longer faceless figures trapped in rumor and legend. They have become real once more, two young boys who carried the burden of a crown they would never wear. Their story, stripped of royal grandeur, is one of innocence stolen and destinies destroyed. In the end, perhaps their greatest legacy lies not in what they might have ruled, but in what their story teaches us, that even in a world of kings and crowns, the loss of two children can echo louder than any throne. So, what are your thoughts about these new revelations? Let us know in the comments section below. Thank you for watching this video. We hope you found it interesting. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Click the next video shown on your screen to catch up on your favorite celebrity stories. See you there.